you're still awake. It's a good sign.
I'll start with a couple of questions. Jim, I know this is a project you've been working on and off for several years, and Tilda, I know you've been attached since the very beginning. Could you say a bit about how this started? Was it the idea of vampires, or was it something else that was the initial impulse?
Well, the initial impulse was vampires, but the idea of getting an overview, a kind of overview of history through them. So it was never a vampire horror film that I wanted to make. I wanted to make a kind of character study, really a love story. And the real inspiration initially for this film actually was from Mark Twain's book, The Diaries of Adam and Eve, which is the real reason I call them Adam and Eve rather than the more pretentious, ridiculous biblical reference. But Twain made that reference, so we continued it. But it's an incredibly beautiful book about the difference between men and women and how they see the world and their consciousness. So it was a book that was given to me by Sarah Driver years ago, and that was the real impetus for the film, to make a love story of two characters with different perspectives. And the idea of vampires appealed to me greatly because it gave an overview, time-wise, of history.
Tilda, this is, I think, at least the second time in your career in which you've played a character who's spanned...
He's very old. Say it.
Spanned many centuries. Orlando, of course. Did you think of that in terms of, given what this film is about, really, in terms of these characters as witnesses to history?
I did think of it, and it felt like home, I have to confess, not just because of Orlando, but because, I don't know, I have a particular love of this kind of atmosphere, the feeling of, downloading all your ancestors and all your futures, and looking for your blood relations. It's just something that I get a kick out of. And so when Jim first proposed to me that we make this film years and years ago, rang me up, I think on New Year's Eve, and said, "Hey man, let's make a film about vampire lovers." It just felt really right.
It worked.
Can you... the sense of place is so important in your films. I mean, just think of the Lower East Side in your earliest films, and Spain in your last film, and Memphis and Mystery Train. And can you talk about Detroit and Tangier? Was it always those two cities, and why those two cities?
Yeah, I don't know. They are very important to me, the locations. The places are like characters in the film. They're always, in all my films, very inspirational. My original, 7 or 8 years ago, my earliest version of this story was in Rome and Detroit. And my thinking was these two kind of empires seeing better days and seeing them now. But the more then I spent some time in Morocco, and I really, really love Tangier particularly. I love Morocco, but there's something about Tangier that is, well, I could go on and on why I love it so much there. It's not a Christian culture, it's not really a European culture, it's not an alcohol culture, it's an Islamic but hashish culture. It's a culture where people on the streets of Tangier have seen every kind of culture invade Tangier, so they have seen every kind of, language runs through the streets of Tangier like water. People that work on the streets that sell things may be illiterate and unable to read, but they may speak Arabic and French and English and Spanish and German and Italian, and no matter how strange one may be, they have seen stranger people. So they're not taken aback by any, strange, freaky people. So that, of course, makes me feel very comfortable. And I just really, I love the atmosphere there. And there's something too, both cities are crumbling in a funny way, but Tangier is packed with life so densely you can't imagine. And Detroit is so depopulated as to be tragic almost, and very moving emotionally. A very sad and beautiful place. And I grew up in the Midwest in Ohio, in Akron, Ohio, and Detroit was like a magic city when I was a child. It was like the Paris of the Midwest. It was, you know, it left Cleveland in the dust culturally, and musical culture. Detroit is insane. It's amazing. It's so deep. So I just had a real fondness for these places, and I know they don't really, why would you make a film with those two places? I don't know, but that's why we did it. So I'm not analytical about it, but I felt very, very strongly about both, connected to both places.
Could you both talk a bit about just conceptualizing the look of the vampire characters? The gloves obviously are a distinctive element. The hair is as well. What?
Well, we set ourselves this really fantastical task, which was to make these fantastical beings originally human, obviously. I mean, they are now immortal, but they were originally mortal, but they're something else, and they are fantastical. And of course, their history and their zoology is based on myth. Don't tell Jim that. But, and so we were looking at all the references from all the movies that there ever have been about vampires, all the books and all the fantasies about, or zoological facts about garlic and crosses and things. And we decided to make a couple of interventions of our own, so that in vampire films in the future there will be people with gloves, for example.
It's because all of these things are very arbitrary. Vampires with fangs first originates in the 1950s in a Mexican vampire film. It's not part of Bram Stoker or Nosferatu or anything. So these things of holy water and the cross and garlic are just added by each person who makes a vampire myth. So our addition was the gloves, because we thought they looked cool. And we wanted to have something of our own added to the vampire mythology. So, in case you didn't know, vampires wear gloves when they're outside of their habitat. Because now everyone knows that.
And they always look cool.
They always look cool, and they are, you know, our idea was to make them very sophisticated, but also kind of still animalistic in a way. So our sound designer, Bob Hine, who's here tonight, or was, he might have fled, and here, and Drew Cunyon, and Ellen Lewis, our casting group of so many amazing people. Scott Ferguson. So we also, like Bob, when you hear heartbeats in the film, they're not human, they are wolf hearts, but slowed down somehow. So we wanted this kind of half animal, half sophisticated human thing. So the hair, I was very adamant. I had some kind of weird hair fetish at this point where I wanted everyone to have long hair. And we were with our wardrobe designer Gerd and wig designer in Germany, and we were looking online for at all these different types of wigs, and Tilda said, why are we looking only at human hair? Why aren't we looking at animal hair as well? So we started looking at images and photographs of animal fur, and Gerd said that he had in fact used like goat or yak hair in the past just to thicken human hair in wigs. So we were like, that's it! Eureka! So the wigs contain human hair as well as yak and goat hair. I don't don't know if you need to know that. We're offering this information. I thought it looked really great, really wild and kind of animalistic for these very sophisticated people that are kind of animals at the same time.
Let's take some questions from out there. Yes.
Yeah, all your films have been a great inspiration for me as a musician, and I wanted to, first, within the scene, I felt it was mind-blowing with the music and the character. I was wondering if you write a lot of your films with music, listen to music, and think of music, and at the same time.
Question is for Jim and whether he writes while listening to music. And maybe you could actually talk a little bit about the music in the film and your band.
Well, I do listen to music a lot while writing the stuff, so it's very important to me. Inspirationally, it's kind of supplies a kind of atmosphere in my imagination, so it's very important to me always, and then ultimately in the film itself, it's very important. So our film has references to found music, to Charlie Feathers and Denise LaSalle, and verbal reference to Schubert. But the original music for the film, Joseph van Vissem, who is single-handedly really making the lute a really fascinating new instrument while also embracing its history, was the basic composer for the film. And he wrote these pieces for lute, and then the band that is comprised of myself and Carter Logan and Shane Stoneback, called Squirrel, also sometimes added to some of Joseph's music and then made some of our own as well for the film. So it's a kind of collaboration of us creating the score, with Joseph kind of at the helm, really.
Yeah. Question about the production design, specifically Adam's place.
Well, it was in the script and described in quite detail, but I never imagined it would look so amazing. And the production designer, Marco Bittner-Rosser, elevated what was in the script into something real and amazing. And the whole art department was incredible. So they took my ideas, kind of badly written description, and made it into this visual thing that I think I'm still amazed by. I used to love going to the set early and just walking through and looking at tiny details everywhere. I don't know if any of you got to see this theatrical production, Sleep No More, that was here in New York, but the sets were like that, man. There were tiny details, millions of things everywhere. And I've never had a set that was so detailed before. So it was incredible. So I really owe it to him and the whole art department. No.
The question is about the portraits in Adam's house.
Yeah, you know, I kind of personalized them a bit more than maybe I should have, but I also tried to imagine Adam's human inspirations. And the thing is, you know, they are kind of snobby, and they talk about humans as being zombies. But they also really appreciate the gifts of humans, and they are humans. You know, these vampires have been turned into vampires, but they are human beings and started as human beings. So I wanted to have this contradiction for Adam, who is always complaining about the humans, and I wanted to make a very obvious contradiction that he very obviously was very indebted and, you know, admired the gifts of humans. His rant about scientists alone I find very moving because he loves their contributions, you know. So it was a kind of way of making him super contradictory in a way. and getting to put up pictures of a lot of amazing people as well.
Yeah.
I'm from Akron as well, and I'm just very curious. What is it about that town, do you suppose, that gave us so many unique artists, including, of course, yourself? What was the atmosphere?
I think they put some kind of hallucinogenic drugs. So it was, you know, Chrissy Hine and Mark Mothersbaugh and many others were drinking this water.
Somebody else remarked about portraits. I love the portraits. I love the fact that they got real vampires, that they had fangs. I love the way they had Christopher Marlowe in there. That was just wonderful. That was just great. And I just had a question. How old are they supposed to be? And do you think that these vampires are in real danger of being wiped out by contaminated blood cells?
Tilda, maybe you can take this one. The question is about the age of the vampires and also whether they are under threat of extinction from contaminated blood.
Good question.
Where we are in the land of science here. Eve is 3,000 years old. She is, a Bructeri druid. And of course her sweetheart is very much younger. He's 500 years old. And what was the other question? Is there a danger? Yep.
Yeah, they are very, very fragile. So they are very endangered. It's very difficult for them. You know, there is contaminated blood, so it's not easy. You can't just go suck somebody randomly off the street. We used to be able to do that. In a manner of speaking. So yeah, they're very delicate. They're very fragile, I think. And the thing about Marlowe is I am a devout anti-Stratfordian, which gets me in trouble with a lot of academics, but I don't believe for a minute that a man named William Shakespeare was even literate or able to sign his own name. So it's one of the biggest scams in the history of literature and on this planet. But it's not really that important because whoever wrote that stuff, it's exquisite. But, you know, there are a lot of anti-Stratfordians throughout history, and they include Mark Twain, they include Ralph Waldo Emerson, they include Sigmund Freud, they include Orson Welles. So I'll put myself among them. But seriously, I think it's a huge scam that went too far, and Britain used Shakespeare historically way after his death for certain reasons, nationalistic reasons, and they went so far that they're never going to take back this myth, which is okay, but I don't believe he wrote a word of anything.
I'm afraid that's all we have time for.